You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Have you noticed your grocery bill creeping higher recently? You're not imagining things. From rising food prices and labor shortages to climate-driven crop failures, the cracks in our food system are widening fast. Today on the show, we're asking, is our food system quietly falling apart? Well, and what can we do about it before it's too late? You're listening to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects the food on your plate or in your grocery bag to the rest of the world. Once you see that your food is connected to quite literally everything, you will not be able to unsee it. I am your host, Dana DePrima. To help us dig into this, we're joined by Toni Farmer, a University of Pennsylvania adjunct professor and unexpected Instagram gardening star. She's someone who's teaching both her students and her followers how to navigate a broken food system and maybe even grow their way out of it. In this episode, you'll hear about regenerative agriculture and how it can be a possible solution, how small and mid-sized farms are being squeezed out of existence by policy and corporate power, and why that's a big problem, and what simple, practical steps you can take to secure your own food future, whether you have a backyard, a windowsill, or just a wallet. Believe it or not, Toni's last name really is Farmer. At first I thought it was a stage name. And her story, from building soil to building community, might just change the way you shop, eat, and think about food. Let's dive into this topic with Toni. It might take you in unexpected directions.
I got my master's almost 10 years ago at University of Pennsylvania, and they didn't have a major for regenerative agriculture. So I was in the environmental science department, and I was like, but agriculture is a huge, huge part of climate change. Why is there no major? And so the program is unbelievably flexible and wonderful. So they allowed me to create my own major. As far as I know, I'm the only one that's ever graduated with that major. Then I started to teach. And going back to that, to master's degree, is when I started to learn how our food supply is in crisis due to climate change. If you leave this podcast or open another window and just Google, is there a looming food crisis or is there a food crisis coming? You will be shocked. It will populate with pages and pages and pages and pages. But the general public doesn't know because the news cycle is so involved in so much other stuff. And also, everywhere we go, there's food, right? There's food at the grocery store and there's food at the restaurants and there's food at the convenience store and there's food in the vending machines and there's food everywhere. So we're like, there's not a food crisis. Yes, there is, and it is getting worse. It is very hard to grow food in a warming planet. I can talk at length about it, so I'll let you ask questions. But my goal is to help everyone with food access. And that means learning to grow a garden in your backyard. It means finding access to farmers markets, to local farms, to regenerative farms. If you're in a city, because most of the world's population is focused in cities, how to grow herbs on your garden, but also maybe you join a little community garden there. Or maybe you find places that will ship food to you. Or maybe every Saturday you're driving to the suburbs to load up for the week from a farmer's market. We need everyone to figure out their food access before this hits hard, because I don't want people to starve.
In addition to climate change, immigration policies, labor shortages, and several other forces are driving the food shortage crisis. Soil degradation has stripped away more than 50% of U.S. topsoil, reducing yields and long-term farm viability. Then we have the farm labor crisis. Nearly 73% of farm workers are immigrants, and stricter immigration policies combined with declining interest from domestic workers have left many farms understaffed. This shortage means that crops go unharvested. Studies estimate that U.S. farms lose more than $3 billion annually due to labor gaps. At the same time, corporate consolidation has concentrated control of seeds, meat packing, and distribution into the hands of a few players, making the system fragile to shocks like meat plant closures. Adding to the problem, nearly half of U.S. farms operate at a net loss, pushing small and mid-sized producers out of business, while food waste remains staggering. About 30 to 40% of the national supply is discarded each year, even as shortages persist.
We've got the polar of obesity and food scarcity going together. 70% of our population is overweight, 40% is obese. We're having this weird moment where we're struggling with too much food and we're about to not have enough food. Poverty creates more issues around food security. We've got tariff situation. Tariffs are going to go away, but they are wreaking havoc on our food system right now. And what they could do permanently is, and I warned about this months ago, the global food system is being restructured because of the tariffs. So you just saw in the news the other day that India, China, and Russia have linked arms. Everyone's concerned about that militarily. I'm concerned about what that's going to do to our food system. They are huge customers of ours. We import a lot of food from those locations. Russia and Canada control some of the world's most important fertilizer that we have to have. If they shut us out, we'll starve to death by our own hand.
And therefore, your emphasis on regenerative farming is more
Yes.
important. So explain a little bit about that to our listeners.
So let me explain the difference between organic and regenerative. Organic is I'm not using non-organic pesticides. You can still use organic products that have been vetted by OMRI and other organizations, and they've got the organic seal. They're still chemical pesticides, but they're safe for human and animal consumption. You can garden without them and be organic as well. You can get certified organic by the federal government, by the USDA. You're only allowed to use that label if you have been certified. It's an expensive and time-consuming process, so some farmers do it and some don't. Regenerative is next step. Regenerative is we are going to heal the soil first. We're concerned about the microbiome. We're concerned about water retention. We're concerned about nutrients in the soil. We're going back to some ancient practices like crop rotation, cover crops. We are caring for soil structure and soil health so that we can grow as much food with no pesticides, no synthetic inputs, synthetic fertilizers. And the 40-year trial is showing not only is this possible, it takes about 3 to 5 years to go from a conventional plot where the soil is almost dead from all the conventional practices to being regenerated. The reason we're not switching faster is because it takes 3 to 5 years. And so the first year, your yield as a farmer will drop to 10% because the soil's broken and you're fixing it. Who's going to pay the farmer to pay the bills and put food on the table and clothe his children or her children while they're doing this transition? It needs to be federal government money. That should be what the Farm Bill is doing. And then we get to the point 3 to 5 years later where we no longer need the federal government paying for this, and we have switched to pesticide-free, healthy food.
Definitely spoken with farmers who have made it happen.
Yeah.
And
it's not going to be easy. It
no,
will
it's
not
not
be
easy. And it takes time and space and patience and data and a will.
Yes. And there's no federal definition either. So there's no definition we can coalesce around. However, 2 organizations, Rodale and another one, have created a definition. And I believe you can get certified through those programs. And then when you see that logo, certified regenerative by Rodale or by whoever else, then you know as a consumer, this was grown regeneratively, which will then also mean organically.
I know a number of organizations that are starting in that direction. And I've definitely asked some of those questions about like, okay, well, once we took organic out of the organic farmers' hands and put it in the USDA's hands, there was, tremendous amount of criticism from those farmers that, oh, well, they've dumbed down USDA and
play the game,
have a certification and you're hitting the middle. That's what happens. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that you can farm organically even better than that. And I think that consumers are learning what regenerative agriculture is, but the definition of it is
most people don't know.
It's loose. There's not a rubric that's very, very specific. And, land is different everywhere. And so is climate.
Yeah, sure is.
So we have to be comfortable with a little bit of give and take in terms of what that means and how it looks in different places.
Sure. A great example would be a dairy farm. So maybe they are certified organic. They cannot give hormones or antibiotics to the animals, right? A large dairy farm that's commercial, everybody gets antibiotics all the time because prophylactically, if you don't want the cows to get sick. You can't be certified organic. So if you're an organic farmer and a cow gets mastitis or gets sick and you pull them to give them antibiotics, you can't put that cow back on once she's better until you get recertified by your USDA agent. What most of them do is they just email all their customers and say, hey, listen, we pulled Betsy off the line. She had an infection. We gave her antibiotics. She's all better. It's been 10 days. We're putting her back on. And the customers go, that's fine with us. But the hassle, if they had to every time getting that recertified, is just such a pain in the neck. So that's what you're talking about, the workarounds, right?
What I hear from a lot of dairy farmers is that Betsy gets culled. There's this real trigger around antibiotics. And like, if your kids are sick, they're going to get antibiotics and then they're going to get better and they're going to be fine. So again, we get into these standards and then we lose a little bit of critical, rational thinking in the middle. On industrial dairies, if a cow doesn't respond quickly to antibiotics or develops chronic mastitis, she's often pulled from the herd and sent to slaughter. Since treatment is costly, her milk must be discarded during medication and her long-term productivity may decline. In fact, mastitis is responsible for an estimated 15 to 20% of culling decisions in the U.S. By contrast, small family farms are more inclined to treat the infection and give the cow time to recover, whether through antibiotics, alternative remedies, or simply rest, because every cow represents a significant investment. While large farms tend to view mastitis as a financial loss, smaller farms often see it as a temporary setback in the life of a cow they know and depend on. A common misunderstanding is that cows treated with antibiotics can never return to milk production, but in reality, U.S. regulations require strict withdrawal times to ensure the medicine clears the cow's system before her milk is sold, making it safe and legal to return her to the line. The real difference lies in scale. Large farms may deem a sick cow too costly to save, while smaller farms are more likely to view mastitis as a temporary setback in the life of a cow. Let's talk about the USDA for a minute. Obviously, we have new leadership, and you've already made some suggestions on what the USDA could be doing that would be helpful in terms of moving agriculture forward. Your sense for what's going on at USDA? I do hear there's more support for big ag. And then there's a lot of beating the drum about like, what about small farmers? And then there's lip service to small farmers. And what's your sense for what's going on there now?
Without getting too political, I mean, I like policy, right? It's very different things to me. So the Farm Bill, most people don't know anything about the Farm Bill. It does a couple of things. Most of it pays for SNAP benefits. 77% of it pays for SNAP benefits for underserved communities, which, by the way, are more white than black, more white. The myth of the welfare queen drives me crazy, of this black inner city woman, is so ridiculous because most people are rural and white who are taking SNAP benefits, and that's been cut. But it used to come out of the Farm Bill. And then the rest of it was three little categories. Conservation. So if the USDA came around and said like, wow, your soil is so destroyed, we can't grow on this any longer, or there's something going on there, important animal or whatever, they would pay the farmer not to grow on that for a couple of years, right? So that's one. Two is crop insurance. So farmers need crop insurance because things are going sideways and you have access, some of them have access to crop insurance, inexpensive crop insurance. They can insure their crops. If things don't go well, the farm is saved, right? And then last is the most complex, and that's commodity payments. And it's probably too complex for this podcast, but here's the general idea. Right now, we have had an incredible year with corn. Like, it's just been amazing. I think corn is like just going to be incredible. That actually causes a problem for corn farmers because it's traded on the global market. And when there's a glut of supply, the price drops. So it's actually better when there's a natural disaster or something. And if you have a good crop of corn, you make bank because there isn't a lot on the market. But when everyone has a good year, you go to sell your corn for $4 a bushel and you're getting two, that's below what it cost you to plant it. To save farms, the federal government pays them a prearranged by acre registered with the USDA. That doesn't make them whole, but it keeps them alive. They send them a big check, a commodity payment, and says, we're going to keep you alive by this big check. So here's what has happened. Small farmers and vegetable farmers have never had access. It's always been commodity crops, corn, soy, wheat, sugar, I mean, all of the commodity crops. And so those farmers are multimillionaires. The image of the sweet farmer and his wife struggling to make ends meet. These guys live luxury lives. They own hundreds of thousands of acres and they live really well. Some of them are billionaires. What the new administration has done is gutted the farm bill and put, I believe it's $60 billion more into commodities and subsidies for our wealthiest farmers. Your question was why? I don't know, but my theory is this. All these small farms are going to go under. They will all be forced to sell their land to large farms, consolidating the food system. And when you control the food system, you control the people.
I think it's a reality. I mean, fighting for small farms is hard, and it's really up to us to do it on the local level.
Mid-range farms are critical too. They're
Yeah.
not getting paid and they're going under faster because they have more debt. A used John Deere combine is $500,000. They're all in debt and no one's coming to the rescue.
Well, and a lot of their funding has been cut or taken away from them.
And the immigration and cuts to US aid and the USDA grants that the US defaulted on and did not pay. We could go on and on. Farmers, I get messages in my Instagram daily. We're struggling. Please share this video. Please help us. It's heartbreaking.
One of the big campaign promises was about food prices, really on both sides, Democrats and
Yes.
Republicans, that we are going to take care of this, that our food prices are going to come down. We're going to get rid of price gouging. We're going to make sure that our food prices are coming down. And yet they've gone up.
Yep, by a lot more than anyone expected.
Right. So let's talk about the factors that are involved in that. Obviously, I mean, we could play the Price is Right and go to the supermarket and compare the price of, like you say, whether it's
Coffee
corn
and
or
yeah,
beef or coffee that we import or avocados we get from
olive
Mexico,
oil. Yeah,
all of those things. But there are other factors that are, working to hide that, whether it's shrinkage in terms of how many cherry tomatoes are in your cherry tomato package now. So
yep,
maybe you're not noticing. But let's
price down.
break down all of the
Sure.
factors.
Okay, so prior to the election, so for reference, I'm an independent voter. I have some conservative values and some progressive. And so I like to see both sides and understand both sides. So prior to the election, I made a comment on Instagram many times where I said neither of these candidates has a plan to reduce your food prices. They are both promising. I'm just calling it like I see it. Trump openly promised tariffs, which I knew were going to be a disaster. I've been making posts about how tariffs are a bad idea for food supply since January. And then Kamala Harris campaign said, we're going to address price gouging. And I'm like, this is a tiny little piece of this. It's an issue, but it's like this big compared to the larger issues. Do you not have a better plan around this? We're already seeing food shortages. And people didn't notice. I track it, but here's a great example. I pulled through the driveway to get a blueberry muffin at Chick-fil-A. There was a little sign taped to the drive-through that said, I'm sorry, we don't have blueberry muffins due to a global shortage of blueberries, because they didn't want to be responsible. Like, they didn't want to charge $8 for a blueberry muffin and have everyone be mad at Chick-fil-A. They passed it to where it needed to go. The drought in Peru, where we get 30-40% of the world's blueberries, right? So we were already seeing shortages due to climate change. So now Trump is in office, tariffs have hit. So food is expensive for a whole host of reasons. We get most of our food from three countries, Mexico, Canada, and China. Huge tariffs on all of them. For a while, that was not being fully passed on to the customers. I talked to a lot of food companies, and they're like, we are trying to figure out how to absorb this because we're afraid if we're the first one to raise costs, if we're Triscuits and we raise the cost, people are going to go down market and buy a lower brand, and we don't want to lose our customers. 2 weeks ago, the food companies pretty much announced we can no longer do this. And you don't want to argue with Goldman Sachs's math, right? And they said we expect that about 67% of the tariff will now be passed on to the consumer. It hasn't happened yet. Good Lord, it hasn't happened yet. Also, farmers are struggling, so their prices are going up because they're losing money for all the reasons that we just talked about. They don't have anyone to harvest. And so that's decreasing supply, right? When all the peaches are on the ground, supply goes down, price goes up. And that is happening in pockets over and over again to different kinds of food. Beef is skyrocketing for three reasons. Number one reason, number one over all else, is drought. It takes 3 to 30 gallons of water per day to raise a beef cow. A little bit if it's a baby, right? All the way up to a big cow. Depends on the variety of the cow, it depends on the weather, depends on how old they are. They could be drinking 30 gallons of water each a day. And that doesn't take into consideration all the water it took to grow the food to feed them. So cattle ranchers in the US are getting out of the business. They're selling their herds. Our herds are at a 75-year low right now. And so regenerative beef from a local farm, the price is actually starting to look reasonable now because the grocery store prices are 60% up. We also have Mexican screwworm, which is an infestation of a fly under the skin that travels on cattle. So we have shut down one of our major beef importers, which is Mexico. The USDA wants that opened back up desperately for supply reasons, but they keep getting it under control, opening the door. It pops up again. We've had one case of human transmission now, so they're cracking down even harder. We have tariffs on beef from Canada. We have a huge tariff, 50%, I think, on Brazil. It keeps changing. So on this day, I think it's 50% on Brazil. And we also get beef from Australia. And there's tariffs on it. So the price of beef is just skyrocketing due to all those reasons. So when you go to the grocery store and you're loading your cart up, this is why it's almost double what it was prior to the election.
In the beef space, isn't there a natural flow in cattle ranching in terms of the number of beef? And we're in a natural low at the moment, in addition to everything else. And then
Yes.
also Brazil, is it my understanding correctly that they have surpassed us in terms of beef production?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I know that in terms of consumption, Argentina, Brazil, we are neck and neck per capita. But in terms of overall consumption, because our population is so high, we blow the rest of the world out of the water. We eat so much beef. And for health reasons, we need to cut back. So here's the silver lining in this. I would never tell anyone to be a vegan or vegetarian. It's not my business what your diet is. But the consumption of cheap fatty meat daily is linked to all kinds of cancer. And so the fact that we may not be able to afford to eat as much of it could benefit our health long term.
Much of the alarm around meat causes cancer overlooks a key distinction. Not all meat is created equal. The studies most often cited are based on cheap industrial meat from CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, where animals are crowded, fed grain-heavy diets, exposed to chronic stress, and often given growth hormones or antibiotics. This type of meat tends to be fattier, lower in omega-3s, and higher in inflammatory compounds, which can contribute to health risks. By contrast, regeneratively raised meats where animals graze on pasture, restore soil health, and live in low-stress conditions has a very different nutritional profile. Grass-fed and pasture-raised beef, for example, has up to 5 times more omega-3 fatty acids and higher levels of antioxidants like vitamin E and conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, both linked to cancer protection. Yet, nearly all of the large-scale studies that warn of red meat and cancer fail to differentiate between processed or industrial meat and responsibly raised regenerative meat, grouping a fast food burger in the same category as grass-fed steak. This broad brush fuels the misconception when, in reality, the way an animal is raised largely determines whether the end product fuels disease or supports health. We talked a little bit about shrinkage.
Yes, seeing a lot of shrinkage right now. High prices entry. So you go into the store and there is your bag of, I'll just pick potato chips, right? And it says, I'm going to make these numbers up, 12 ounces in the bag. Bag is this size, same logo, brand, everything on it. 2 weeks later, you come in and you don't notice, but now it says 11 ounces on the bottom, but the package is the same size, looks the same size, and they pump it with air mainly to keep the chips from breaking, but it has the added benefit that you can't tell how much is in there. I saw the other day a granola bar package side by side, the same price. One was the old package and one was the new stock. The old package, $5.99, 6 granola bars. New package, $5.99, 5 granola bars. That's shrinkage. So they're lowering the amount of product, but not changing the packaging and the price. And we shop on autopilot. If you think you're shopping and you're carefully curating what you put in your cart for your family, oh no, you're not. And if you don't believe me, Google the Tropicana orange juice marketing disaster and just enjoy reading what happened when they changed their packaging and what happened, because we shop by habit. We just grab and put in our cart.
And to get people to change and to make adjustments is so much harder than sneaking one past them in the supermarket.
Yeah. Oh, well, and customers are going to catch on. They will. I mean, maybe they'll listen to this podcast and they'll start shopping differently. And then there will be a backlash, and that will cease to be a lever that the food companies can use. So education is key.
What do you see that consumers can do that's within their grasp and ability and budget to make some changes that will really have an impact?
I'm an advocate for growing a garden. Not everyone can do this, but during World War II, when we did the victory gardens, food was being rationed. There's lots of political arguments about why we had that campaign, but I'm going to go with we were supporting the troops, food was rationed, and so people grew almost 40% of their food in their backyard. They didn't have fancy equipment. They didn't have beautiful products like we have today, beautiful retractable hoses and all that stuff that I love. They just went out and planted food in the ground, and they watched it and took care of it because their life depended on it, right? If you want to feed your kids, you got to make sure those green beans were healthy. So grow a garden, and that's what all my content is about, right? Organically. Get to know your local farmers if you can, even if you live in a city. Go out for the weekend, find your local farmers, follow them on Instagram. This will almost be cheaper for you because you're cutting out the middleman. And I love grocery stores. I hope grocery stores are around forever. I love a grocery store. But for right now, when the prices are so high, I got to know my cattle rancher here, like 20 minutes from me. And I go out there and I pick up my main chicken and my beef and stuff from him. His name is Chad. I know his daughter and his wife. I know his dog's name. And I also feel like because he knows me, if there was ever a shortage and he had too many customers, he's going to hold my order for me and not sell it to somebody else, right? Which is a scary thought. But we say shake the hand of the person who feeds you, right? So get to know your farmers. Order online. There are regenerative cattle farms with high quality beef all over the country who ship and are struggling because people think they can get it cheaper at the grocery store. Lily Hill Cattle on Instagram. Will Harris is White Oak Pastures. They will ship to you. Let me see what else. Let's start learning to can. Let's start learning to dehydrate. Let's start learning to freeze. Let's start learning how to cook out of our refrigerator instead of running to the grocery store. Let's learn how to cook and cook at home. Listen, there's no shortage of cooking videos on Instagram. I do cooking videos. You don't even need me. There's thousands of them. And I would bet there's many that show you how to cook nose to tail or show you how to cook in a scrappier way. So those would be my top 5. You'll eat healthier. You will lose weight. You'll feel better. You'll stop eating processed food. It could be our salvation. It could be.
I hear from farmers and ranchers, American farmers and ranchers, really, where I think there's a sense of pride around farming that is very powerful and really beautiful. But there's this mentality that we have to feed the world. And so sometimes I worry about this when we were talking about before with the disappearance of small and mid-sized farmers and heading to bigger consolidated farming, where we have centralized food instead of decentralized food in our local communities. And I guess fundamentally, I believe that we need farmers in our communities so that you can know your local beef farmer and his wife and his dog and his kids and where he is, and he'll hold your meat for you and all of that. Like, I believe that's really important. And I think we saw that during the pandemic. My question to you is, what do you think about that? The idea that we're importing food from other countries. Sometimes it's a specialty item that we can't grow here. And it does help us manage the prices within our own borders.
Yes.
But do we really need to feed the world? And can we feed ourselves, our entire country, with these small and mid-sized regenerative farms, for example?
That is a big question, and I want to be accurate. global food system selling and buying has lowered our food prices drastically. So let's say you're the brand manager for Progresso vegetable soup, and the board of directors come to the decision that we need a 3% increase in sales for next year to keep our shareholders happy. Totally common, right? Totally. It happens every day. Every year they're forecasting. So it gets down to the brand manager for Progresso soup line, and she panics because she's like, I think we're in every market we can be in right now. Maybe people will be buying a little bit more soup, but I don't know. So it's hard to make projections. I've got limited ways to meet that 3%. One of the ways I can do it is I can find cheaper ingredients for these. And so if I buy from the American farmer who's providing my carrots and my potato, I've got to pay this price. But if I import it from Canada or China or wherever, it's half the price. And so if I do that enough, I can keep the price lower and I'll make the 3% back up and I keep my job. This happens over and over and over again, year after year after year. And this is why our food prices have remained relatively stable and our food supplies become more global. What the tariffs did was unravel that overnight. So now Progresso brand manager is like, where's my American supplier? How can I get this locally? So we have the most beautiful soil in the world, some of it. We have more arable farmland, more of it than almost any country in the world. Russia has 20% of the world's population and 10% of the world's arable farmland. Russia's in a similar case. They do need us. If we cut them out, we could grow all our own food. We'd have to cut back on beef because 40% of our land all of our arable farmland goes to meat. So that should be reduced, right?
Most people don't realize that the majority of farmland in the United States isn't growing food they'll ever eat directly. It's growing food for livestock. Roughly 40% of America's arable land is devoted to this purpose, with about 39% dedicated to feed crops like corn and alfalfa, and just 1% to the animals themselves. That means when you eat a steak or a burger, you are also indirectly consuming acres of crops you'll never see on your plate. In fact, less than 2% of U.S. farmland is used to grow fruits and vegetables for human consumption, even though dietary guidelines recommend that half of our plate should be filled with them. This imbalance highlights the inefficiency of the current food system. It takes up to 25 pounds of grain to produce just 1 pound of beef, a trade-off that drains land, water, and energy while leaving fewer resources for growing the nutrient-dense foods we need most.
Okay, should we feed the world and can we feed ourselves? I do think outside of specialty products and coffee and things, we can't provide ourselves with bananas, subtropical products. We can't do cinnamon, we can't do vanilla, we can't do coffee. There goes your latte, right? We have to import those things. And people are like, what about Puerto Rico? They grow coffee. Oh, no. Puerto Rico does grow a beautiful coffee, but the demand is so high in Puerto Rico, they import 2/3 of their coffee. So they're not helping the mainland out with their coffee supply. Hawaii, pretty much the same thing. They do give us some coffee, lovely coffee from Hawaii, but we've got to import it. And coffee's a whole other podcast, by the way. All right, then the other question is, should we feed the world? Well, in terms of US aid, yes, I would very much like to send food to impoverished countries. We are the wealthiest nation in the world by far. So imagine you have a billionaire living in your neighborhood and everyone's food insecure, and the billionaire doesn't fund the food pantry. That's who we are in the world right now. We are the rich guy on this block. Even though you don't feel rich, a country is rich. I would very much like to see us continue with US aid. That's my personal thing. And it also helped US farmers as well. In terms of the exporting, boy, are you really making me think? Because let's do soybean as an example. We don't eat a lot of soy. We don't eat tofu. China consumes most of the world's soy. So here's where your tax dollars are going. Giant soy farms growing tons and tons of soy only for export to China. Have a bad crop, they get a giant subsidy payment. Billions of dollars were paid out to soy farmers the last time we had tariffs on them for food that we will never eat. So our tax dollars are paying a few wealthy farmers to grow soy and export food that we don't even eat. How about that?
And those subsidies aren't just crop protection, meaning,
Right. It's not just
right?
crop insurance, it's a check. Oh, we're sorry you made less money. Let's say you thought you were going to get $4 a bushel and you got three and you could lose the farm over that. We're going to bring you up to here with a big fat check. We're not going to make you whole. Like they're never like paying the whole market value, but we're going to make sure you can meet that John Deere payment and you can like whatever, right? And then they roll into another year.
Mhm.
That's your tax dollars.
Let's go back to class for a second when your class was really talking about the Farm Bill before everybody made you talk about more than just the Farm
Yeah.
Bill. Obviously, yes, most of it is going to SNAP. I know
Mhm.
that's on the table.
Mhm.
But also going back to subsidies and the history of subsidies go back to FDR. And we haven't changed a whole lot since then.
No,
We're still
nothing.
subsidizing the same thing. So we're not looking at how the world has changed. We're not looking at the import export. We're not looking at how the climate has changed since then.
Republicans tend to lead the charge on the committee for the Farm Bill. And the lobby for pesticide companies, Monsanto, or I'm sorry, it's Bayer now, Cargill, the major companies who make all their money off of farming, billions and billions of dollars, have a lobbyist in the office outside those guys every single day. And they donate to their campaigns. Interestingly, not that much. It doesn't actually take that much money to sway a
How much?
congressperson. We're talking in the tens and hundreds of thousands, not in millions, because they want to get reelected and they need money. I'll give you $100,000. I have never been behind closed doors. So this sounds terrible what I'm about to say. I don't know exactly how it goes down, but this bill is coming up and it's going to limit the use of pesticides for whatever. And we sell that pesticide and we'll make $100,000 donation to your PAC if you vote no. And you're ignorant if you think that that doesn't happen.
And now we have some legislation on the table, both at the federal level and at the state level, to protect those pesticide companies from lawsuits.
So it's not direct. This was up under Biden. I think the House passed it, didn't make the Senate, got tabled. It got rolled into a bill that just got approved. And what it does is it says you don't have to disclose new research on the safety. So, say some researcher at Harvard discovers that Roundup is causing rapidly increasing skin cancer. Oh my gosh, this is like crazy. I'm making that example up. And the pesticide companies do not have to notify you. They don't have to change their labeling or anything. So that means it would make it very hard to sue them in a court of law. They could say, "Why didn't you warn us?" Wasn't legally required to do that. That's what it did. That's my understanding of it after reading and reading and reading, because it's complicated.
How, as a professor, with all of this going on and all of these issues, I mean, it's like drinking from a fire hose. How are you staying informed on all of this and also growing vegetables?
So this is so personal, but when I was a little kid, we moved every 2 years. And so I had no friends growing up. Like people are interested in the new girl for a couple of weeks and then you get bullied. And I was alone a lot with books. I learned how to sew. I learned how to grow food with my mom. I learned how to build stuff. I learned how to cook. And I read and read and read and read. And that's pretty much who I am today, even though I have a million friends now. I have so many good friends. So I love building community. So I get up about 6:30 every morning and I read Ag News for an hour. And I enjoy it. And it's complicated. It's probably stuff the average person couldn't read, not because they're not smart, but it's because it builds on it. So if you're reading an article that talks about commodity payments and subsidies and this congressman, if you don't know who those are, you got to stop and figure all that out. But I already know all that stuff. So then I make explainer videos. And I do it from my garden when I'm out there working on my garden. And also, I have been caring for my garden regeneratively for 20 years, and it sort of takes care of itself at this point. I still have issues, but boy, oh boy, you guys all think I work so hard in my garden. I do not. I go out and I pick food and it's wonderful. And I want you all to be able to do that too.
We could talk all day about all of the issues out there, but is there anything that we missed that's particularly
Yeah.
top of mind for you?
Yeah, they've cut $1 billion to our food pantries at a time when the lines are getting longer and longer. And let me tell you, I work with food pantries. That's a big part of their funding. One food pantry I work with, their budget was $5,000 a month to run the whole pantry, and it was all coming from federal funding. It's gone. So they have nothing coming in. So if you're listening to this podcast and you have $10 to spare, or you're wealthy and you don't want to be the wealthy person on the street where other people are going hungry and children are going hungry, donate to your local food pantry. I would rather you make a regular donation, like a monthly, than a big one at one time, because a monthly regular donation helps them project how many people they can feed, how much food they can buy. So donate to your local food pantry. That would be my final, most important message to you.
That's it for today's episode of One Bite is Everything. If you're walking away feeling like your food choices matter more than ever, you're right. What we eat, where we get it, and who we support at the checkout line or the farmer's market isn't just personal. It's political, it's environmental, and it's urgent. Toni, farmer, reminded us that growing your own food, even a handful of herbs in a window box, is an act of resilience. That knowing your local farmer might one day mean securing your own food supply, and that real change doesn't require perfection, just awareness, a little action, and a willingness to care. So maybe tonight you make dinner a little bit differently. Maybe you look up your nearest farmer's market, or maybe you just start asking questions, because the more we ask, the more we understand, and the more power we hold. Thank you for being here for another episode of One Bite is Everything. I am your host, Dana DePrima. One Bite is Everything is co-produced by Sonia Dillon, and the sound engineering and original music is by Russell Chappa. If this episode gave you something to think about, please take a moment to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. It helps more people like you discover these conversations, and it really does make a difference. I will see you right here again next week for another episode of One Bite is Everything. Until next time, eat like it matters, because it does.